Hello, hello, hello. Hey everyone, welcome to the fifth edition of my GMAT content verbal series on GMAT Club's YouTube channel. Very excited to be here. Today's deep dive is going to be on evaluate questions in GMAT Critical Reasoning. I hope you guys are looking forward to this. For anyone who doesn't know who I am, my name is Harsha. I'm a GMAT tutor. I've been in the GMAT space for the last 6 years, and I'm very passionate about trying to help people crack the GMAT. And my main objective today is to make you more comfortable with evaluate. Stick with me for a couple of hours. You will build a good amount of conceptual clarity on all things pertaining to evaluate as a question type, and of course, you will also get a little bit more comfortable with this rather intimidating question type, right? If you guys want to check out the earlier sessions that we have done in this sequence, those would be tagged, those would be linked in the YouTube description. We have done 4 so far: inference, assumption, strengthen, weaken, boldface as well. Today is the day for evaluate. Okay, so what are you going to get from this session? What are you going to get if you spend a couple of hours today, right now? So this is a session that's intended as a crash course on everything you need to know as far as CR evaluate is concerned. So you'll get the fundamental concepts that you must know, a way to solve these questions systematically. You don't talk about evaluate without talking about the yes no test, or in common parlance, the variance test. We're going to discuss that. And of course, certain types and variations of evaluate questions that you typically see on GMAT critical reasoning. And here is something that matters a lot to me. You should understand what is a correct meter for evaluate questions, and you'll see what I mean by that. And as always, some good principles for solving from my end. You're going to get that as well. Needless to say, we're going to solve some good questions together while we are here. But make sure you participate, guys. That way, it's a lot of fun. So let me begin straight up. Before we jump into what evaluation and evaluate is in critical reasoning, let's talk about what evaluation means in general, in real life. And here is what I need you to remember. When you talk about evaluation, it means assessment. If you are being evaluated on something, it means you're being assessed on something. If you are evaluating something, you are assessing something. That's fundamentally all you need to know to begin with, right? So here are some examples of evaluate which are closer to your real life. I'm sure a lot of you will resonate with with these examples. Now, if I tell you that the GMAT exam is evaluating you on certain skills, yeah, that's true. That algo, that very interesting algo, it's assessing you on certain parameters. That's how you get that score, right? Now, some of you are job seekers, I'm sure. So in a job interview, that interviewer is evaluating you on how well you're a fit for that particular job. He or she is assessing your fit, right? And of course, for those of you in the early stages of your GMAT prep, you might be considering a course, right? You're evaluating whether that's the right fit for you. Now, one of the important aspects here to understand is usually you evaluate something for a certain purpose. So you're being evaluated for a particular job. Usually we try not to evaluate a person as it is. This guy is evil or this guy is good. We're trying to evaluate whether that person fits that particular purpose. But yeah. Now, end of the day, this is what I need you to understand. An evaluation is an assessment, it's a judgment, usually for a specific purpose. Okay. Now, now that we've discussed what evaluate in general means, the question you should ask is, does it change just because we are getting into a standardized exam like GMAT? Absolutely not. In my humble opinion, CR is as real life as it gets. Everything that you see in real life translates beautifully onto GMAT critical reasoning, right? And therefore, the meaning of evaluation doesn't change. So as you start solving a lot of evaluate questions, don't worry about what evaluate means. It means the same, whether it's in life or in CR. Okay. So just checking, guys. I hope you guys can hear me well and the audio and video is coming through. Meanwhile, here, if you're ready, let's do a couple of questions. And through these questions, I'm going to deep dive through these questions in order to build all the necessary conceptual muscles and make sure your processes are also up and right. So here is question 1 on your screen. Once you're done solving, just on the chat, let me know what your answer is. I'll bring in the next question. All right, good to see some answers trickling in. Uh, I'll just wait for a few more seconds if there's any more of you who want to share your answers, and then I'll just move on. But if you're here, make sure you participate. It's a zero judgment zone. All right, that's fantastic. Thanks, guys, for participating. Naman, Ragini, Diwan. So I think I'll move on to the next question. But as of now, I'm just registering what answers we chose. So quite a few candidates for D, and we also have an A. So we'll discuss eventually. Here goes the second question on your screen. Let's have some fun with this. Great, guys. Great to see some answers coming in. All right. I'm going to give you another 10 15 seconds for this if there's any more of you who are trying this right now. And then we're going to just hammer through all the concepts and the processes. Great, guys. Fantastic. To be fair, the questions that I brought up, the question one and the question two, not on the difficult side, more of a warm up. It's a juicy full toss from my side. Towards the end, we're going to do some tough ones as well, and we're going to have fun with it. But extremely well sorted. Very happy to see that. A is like the popular choice, and I also see a D. So we'll discuss those two definitely. Right. All right. So now that that drill is done, let's kind of understand what evaluate looks like on GMAT critical reasoning. Now, I know the title of the video is evaluate argument, but not every time are we dealing with argument based questions. Occasionally, we'll also have questions that are plan based, right? Now, so common types of evaluate questions in CR, fundamentally two, the way I understand it. Um, Usually you have an argument based question, and this is like the bulk of what you see. And then you also see quite a bit of this. This is like the absolute majority. Now, what do I mean by argument based questions? Your question one is an example of that. If you have read this and you've solved this, you know that we are dealing with an argument. And what do I mean by argument? There is a premise, there are premises, there is a conclusion, and the question is asking you what would be most useful to determine in order to evaluate that argument, right? So that's a standard question that you typically see. The other scenario that you see is a plan based question. Your question two is on that side of the spectrum. Now, if you ask me if question two is presenting to you an argument, actually, no, you don't see the author actually making a conclusion. Yet, what you'll see is there's a specific plan that's being brought to you, there's a specific goal for that plan, and the evaluate question here is usually asking you to assess something pertaining to the plan, right? And this is like the bulk of evaluate questions that you'll see, but I will also discuss some minute variations as we proceed, right? So let's deep dive a little bit into argument based questions, right? This is like the bulk majority of what we typically see, right? They're presented with an argument of some sort. I want you to really focus on what we are asked to do. We are not being asked to give us our assessment, provide our assessment of the argument. You might have read the Capuchin monkey argument and told me that it's a good argument, it's a bad argument. That's my judgment. But we are not being asked to provide our judgment of it. We are being asked to identify what would help best do an assessment of that argument. So I hope you see that small difference. But just to summarize, any argument is essentially a set of premises leading to a conclusion. When you think about evaluating an argument, it means they are being asked to assess the logical validity of the argument. Now, what do I mean by logical validity of the argument? Think of it this way. Given this premises, how logical is it to arrive at this conclusion? That's what you're trying to assess. In other words, is this a sound argument? Is this a logical conclusion to make given those premises? That's what argument evaluation means. Now, what are we asked to do? What is that one piece of information among the choices that will help you the most in figuring out whether this is a good argument or a bad argument? I hope the idea of argument evaluation is very, very clear. If any doubts, please jump into the chat and let me know. Okay. So this is one type of this is one type of evaluation question that you see. A plan question is nothing different, to be honest, but it's just there, so I'm covering it. So as we know, you're given a plan, you're given a goal. Typically, you have a goal as well, and you have to pay a lot of attention to the question stem, because it's not always that they will ask you to figure out what will help assess whether the plan will be a success. Sometimes they will give you a question stem which says which of these choices will help you determine if this plan will fail, and so on and so forth. There are a lot of variations there. You need to be careful and read the question stem carefully. I hope that also is coming through, right? But in both these question types, they're asking you to find something that will help you assess whether the argument is logical to make. They will help you assess whether the plan will succeed or fail or whatever they're given you. I hope that meter is clear in terms of what they're asking us to do, right? Meanwhile, I'll just take a quick peek at the comments. Yeah, the one I think we will discuss it, but I think you're right. Absolutely, your logic is right. We're going to go through it. So I know these two questions are easy, but I'm intentionally using easy questions so that I can do this full process walkthrough with you in terms of how I approach evaluate questions on the GMAT. Okay, and then as we scale up to tougher questions, it should be a lot more fun. Okay, so very quickly, what's the process? There could be many different processes, but what's a process that I swear by? Now, the first question somebody might ask is, should you read the question stem first or should you read the argument or passage? Now, there are two schools of thought. Some people would say, go read the question, that's perfectly fine. I personally would prefer reading the argument / passage first, free from the bias that a question stem can introduce. And oftentimes the question stem contains context that without reading the argument may be hard to really understand. So I'm a big fan of reading the argument / passage first, whatever that is. Now, it's not just about reading what's given. Once you read something, you have to ensure that you've really understood it. So, firstly, as far as CR is concerned, trust me, you have the time to read slowly. What I mean by that is don't be in a rush to jump from sentence to sentence. One of the high value add activities you can do is pause between sentences, just so that you give your brain the time to process and internalize the core idea of what you're reading, right? Um, a lot of times I see that this doesn't happen, and the understanding therefore is not as clear as it should be. So, first, carefully read the argument or passage, whatever that is. But once you've read this thing, usually what I like to do, and I really believe it will help, is if you spend a few seconds ensuring that you're clear on the absolute important nitty gritties. What do I mean by that? In an argument based question, if it's an argument based question, you want to be crystal clear on what is the conclusion. You want to be crystal clear on what is the basis, or in other words, the support. In other words, how has the author arrived at that conclusion? You want to be crystal clear on those things, right? So if it's an argument, what is the conclusion? How has the author arrived at that conclusion? You need to build a solid understanding of this before you actually go to the next steps. That would help. Now, okay, you've built this solid understanding of what's the conclusion, what's the basis of support, what next? Now, in a plan question, just to take it to the other direction, in a plan question, you don't have a conclusion, but you have a clearly defined plan, and oftentimes you'll see a goal. By goal I mean what is the plan supposed to try and achieve, right? So these for me are important aspects. I really want to understand this before I go in. That's point one. Now, then it's all about reading the question stem, and I think a lot of times errors happen here because we don't read carefully. Granted, this particular question you're seeing on screen, there's no trickery in the question stem, but that's not always the case. Sometimes there's a lot of traps that's going on there. You need to really read that carefully. Now, okay, you read this question: which of the following would be most useful to determine in order to evaluate the argument? It's a classic evaluate the argument question. It doesn't stop there. Once you read the argument or passage, you tried to bring clarity on conclusion and basis, or plan and goal. Once you read the question stem, before you jump to the answer choices, one of the things that you should do is build absolute clarity on what is it you need. And trust me, guys, if you spend a few seconds on this, you can avoid a lot of downstream stupid mistakes, right? For example, what is it exactly you need to assess, right? Spend some time on that, and I think it will help you a lot. Then comes, of course, the answer choice analysis, and of course, that's an entire discussion in itself. So, Reeth, thanks for replying. I think you also got it right. Now, let's kind of run through this process together for this fairly simple question together. What's happening with this particular argument? So, Capuchin monkeys in Venezuela, they often rub a certain type of millipede into their fur. Now, this is a very weird passage to read, right? The context, you're rubbing a living thing into your fur. Okay. Secretions of these millipedes have been shown to contain two chemicals that are potent mosquito repellents, and mosquitoes carry parasites. So, if you see what the author is doing here, the author is building the case that perhaps these monkeys are rubbing these millipedes into their fur because they want to protect themselves against mosquitoes. And you see the rest of the argument kinds of builds towards that. The rubbing behavior is rare except during the rainy season when mosquito populations are at their peak. It's again building this idea that perhaps the reason this rubbing even happens is the mosquitoes. You want to protect yourself from the mosquitoes, you being the monkey, right? Therefore, monkeys probably rub millipedes into their fur. You have this nice conclusion indicator. I think all of you are clear that this is the conclusion, right? So again, your process starts with being very clear on what's the conclusion, what's the support. The conclusion is that the monkeys probably rub millipedes into their fur only because it pays a little bit of dividend if you really focus on visualizing the conclusion exactly. Because if you just casually read through this in a tougher question, you will miss these kinds of words. I'm sure some of you at least have made those mistakes earlier, including me. I've also made these mistakes earlier. But notice, only because doing so helps them protect. In other words, why is it the monkeys rub the millipedes into their fur? Only for this one reason, that is to protect themselves from mosquitoes. Yeah. And I think we've understood what the logic is. Now, if I ask you the question, forgetting that this is an evaluate question, As in a flaw question, I'm asking you, what kind of issue do you see in this argument? Is there a problem you see in this argument? Any problem? So the question is, you know the argument, you understand what's the conclusion, you understand how the author has arrived at the conclusion. Is this a proper argument, or is there some issue with the argument? Or let's say, is there a potential flaw, potential problem with the argument? Ooh, that's a great answer. Causation is assumed. That's actually a fantastic answer, which means that you have been doing a CR for a while because you understand some of the finer aspects here. That's great, Naman. Uh, yeah, there were two things that came to mind. Number one is the very subtle scope shift that's happened. I don't know if you guys noticed. Uh, Everything that's being talked about in the premises is about Capuchin monkeys. These monkeys sitting in Venezuela, they often rub the millipede into their fur, and it's seemingly for the mosquito protection. But if you look at the conclusion, you see there's an aspect of generalization. It's not talking about Capuchin monkeys in particular, it's kind of generalizing towards monkeys in general. So that brings to mind a particular potential flaw. Could there be other types of monkeys who rub millipedes into their fur for completely different reasons, having nothing to do with this, with mosquitoes? Because if in that case, this generalization may not be valid, right? Yeah, capuchin monkeys might be rubbing the millipede for mosquito protection, but what about those other monkeys which are rubbing millipedes for as a moisturizer, perhaps, right? So think about that. Oftentimes, what I see is people may not notice a small shift in the scope like this. But yeah, the main issue, and this is what Naman pointed out, is all I know is, hey, during the rainy seasons, two things are happening. During the rainy season, it is true that it is peak mosquito season. You see a lot of mosquitoes in that time, and it is also exactly at the same time, the rainy season, that you see the capuchin monkeys doing this rubbing, right? Rubbing the millipedes into their fur. Just because two things are happening at the same time and they tend to happen at the same time, it could be correlation. How do you know that it's because of the mosquitoes that how do you know that it's because of the mosquitoes that this is happening? How do you know that it's because the mosquitoes are at peak that these monkeys are doing this rubbing activity during the rainy season? We don't know that, right? And that's what Naman alluded to, right? So this is also a flaw. Now, if you're asking why am I focusing on the flaws, this is an evaluate question. The answer is very simple. If you have developed an eye to find the faults or the flaws in an argument or a plan from your reading of the argument, that gives you a small edge when you're solving evaluate questions. In fact, it gives you an edge with assumption, strength, and weak in all of these question types, argument based question types. Why is that? The reason is very simple. Every flaw that you see, it highlights something where you want more information. So if somebody had presented this argument to you and you were tasked with assessing this argument, this would be information you want to know because you're worried about this particular issue wrecking the argument. So it would be very useful to know, is this really a problem, yes or no? And that's where you will see that if your brain is tuned to find the faults in an argument, um, it will also be tuned to do evaluation very well. as necessary. Now, I think humans in general are excellent at finding faults. Usually with other people, you just have to translate that into CR. Okay. So I think this, it requires a bit of practice if it's not yet coming naturally to you. But this is a good ability to build in general. Okay. So that's the only reason we're discussing this. So I think you can see everything that we've identified as a flaw translates to a question you want to ask, which could be useful to evaluate the argument. For instance, I would ask the question, is mosquito population being at peak, is that really the reason for why rubbing occurs? Because if the answer to this question is yes, that makes me understand the argument in a different way. If the answer to that is no, I judge the argument in a different way, right? So I hope this is clear. There might be a reason why it is rare during other weathers. Yeah, and exactly, it might be rare. There could be some other reason why it's rare during other weathers. Is absolutely spot on. Those are the kind of things you should be thinking about once you've read the argument. Now, for me, this step, which I have highlighted here, which is trying to find the potential flaws or issues, it's useful and optional. I'm never going to say it's compulsory, right? It's very useful. It gives you an edge if you have a natural eye for this. How do you develop that natural eye? Practice, untimed practice. If you build that, you should see some benefit. Now, does this mean that if I don't find these flaws, I won't be able to solve the question? Absolutely not. You have answer choices for a reason. Okay. But yeah, it's a good thing to build. Now, the next step in the process, okay, you've understood the argument and maybe you got lucky, found a few flaws along the way. Be very, very granular with the question stem. Understand exactly what you need. And I'm going to show you with some of the tougher questions also. If you show some discipline here, it will save you. You'll be able to really connect the choice to exactly what you're supposed to do, and it will help you reject some of the seemingly tough choices, right? So in this case, what is it we need exactly? We need a choice that most helps us assess whether we could conclude this particular thing, whether monkeys, them rubbing millipedes into their fur, is it only because of the mosquitoes? It will help us assess that. Okay. If that is clear, now let's come to the final portion of your process, which is the yes no test. Now, in popular literature, this is called as the variance test. Uh, it's also known as a yes no test, though it does not necessarily have to be a yes no. The name doesn't matter, but it's fairly useful. I'm going to show you how it works for those of you who are not familiar. Now, typically, a correct evaluate choice, it brings to us a certain question. The answer to that question will help us figure out if this is a good argument or plan, one way or the other. For example, if you ask this question, the answer to this question, is mosquito population being at peak the reason? Is there no other reason? If the answer is yes, that helps you in a certain way. If the answer is no, that helps you in a certain way. One way or the other, you're getting some understanding, a better understanding of the argument. That's what's happening here. So typically, your evaluate answer choices usually can be taken to two extremes. Sometimes it's yes, no. Sometimes it's 0, 100. Sometimes it's few, many. You get the gist. It doesn't necessarily have to be just yes, no. But what happens at those two extremes? If it's a correct choice, typically what will happen is one side will strengthen your belief in that argument or plan, the other side will weaken your belief in the argument or plan. And this is what we call the yes no test. If this is happening, that's a very good candidate for correct answer. Now, one of the questions that we might have is, do we have to do this variance test for every single choice? Not really. There are choices, there will be choices in any question that you could spot from a mile away to be irrelevant, completely irrelevant. You don't have to necessarily do the test for everything, but where stuck, where it feels a little, tricky, dicey, might as well try this. It will help, right? So remember this, one choice should typically strengthen your belief in what you're trying to do, and the other choice should weaken your belief in that argument or plan, whatever it is. So, because of this aspect of this choice being a combination or amalgam of strengthen and weaken, the meter of what works and what does not work is exactly the same as strengthen and weaken. We are looking for choices that, if taken one way, it makes you believe in the argument. It does not have to conclusively prove the argument. In other words, it just like a strengthener would, it just has to make you believe a little more in that point, in that conclusion. You should not be asking the question, but what if this happens this way, and find some obscure case to break it. Not the point. Similarly, on the other direction, what you will typically see is it absolutely makes you doubt the argument or plan, right? It does not have to absolutely shatter the plan. Okay. Uh, Here is a small asterisk I'm adding, which is, uh, in general, while the variance test or yes no test is fantastic, don't live or die by it. Don't be very dogmatic about using it. And I'll tell you why I feel this way. Now, of course, if you see a choice which, when taken to an extreme, strengthens, and when taken to another extreme, it weakens, of course, that's a great candidate. Now, sometimes you will see a choice, irrespective of which way you take it, it's just making you believe more. This is typically not a good choice. This is just a strengthener. It just makes you believe more in the argument. How does it help you assess the argument is a question that you could ask. Likewise, you might have a choice that in both directions seems to be only weakening your argument or plan. That also doesn't seem like a good choice, does it? It's not really helping you assess the plan. It's just telling you that, yeah, it's just weakening your belief in the plan altogether. Now, you might also have some choices which, in one direction, it makes you believe more in the argument. In some other direction, in the other direction, it's actually completely irrelevant. You might also have you might also have a choice which, in one direction, is absolutely irrelevant. It doesn't work at all. It has nothing to do. But if you consider it in the opposite direction, it might have a weakening impact. Things like this is possible. Here is another thing that's possible. Whichever direction you look at it, it's irrelevant. Right? Now, all of these are possibilities. This is your typical answer choice in like 95-98% of the cases. I'm still giving you a 2% variance here. I'm still giving you a 2% open to possibilities scenario here, because remember, in all of these questions, you'll see the phrasing, which of the following most helps you assess. It is a process of elimination game. Imagine I gave you a scenario where you have 5 choices, of course, A, B, C, D, but imagine that choice A, B, C, D are all completely irrelevant. Whereas there is this choice E, which is at least somewhat relevant. At least in one direction, it helps you to assess, even if the other side is irrelevant. In such a case, just by process of elimination, you would still go for one of these things, right? So 98% of the times, this is not what you'll see. You'll see a very clear yes, no. But with all of these tools like negation test, variance test, I usually try to say keep an open mind, have a little flexibility. Yeah, I hope this helps. Hey Vikalp, nice of you to join in. Guys, any doubts? Are we okay? Let me know if you guys are with me so far. Because now we'll just thrash through the answer choices, and then we'll finish the next one and we'll go on. So I'll just wait for like 15-20 seconds just to see if there's any doubts on this, everything that we've discussed so far. I promise the theory is all in the initial part. After that, we'll just solve a few questions. Are there any particular guidelines you want us to follow every step? It's so we don't. I never want to. I don't want to overcomplicate CR by putting very concrete steps. End of the day, it's just reasoning at work. These are the steps, and I'm gonna kind of list it down and put it in a very nice format for you. That should help, right? All my guidelines will be on that one slide, which you can just keep with you, right? So that's coming up. But yeah, thanks for the question. Cool. Now, again, remember, make sure that all the important details are here. So, what is the conclusion? Monkeys probably rub millipedes into their fur only because of one reason, that is to protect them from themselves against mosquitoes, right? And we need to find a choice that helps us evaluate the logical validity of this conclusion based on these premises, right? And one of the great points that was brought in by people here was, all I know is this rubbing behavior is happening during the rainy season only, pretty much. But is that because the mosquito population is at its peak, or is it because of some other reason? Just because you have events happening together doesn't mean it's causal, right? There's a causality, right? Fair. So let's run through each of these choices as a first attempt at solving through the entire process. Whether the two chemicals provide any protection for millipedes against their own predators. This, from a mile away, I think most of you should be able to see it's irrelevant. Why? Remember, always tie it back to what you're trying to do. What is it we are trying to do? We are trying to figure out whether the reason monkeys rub millipedes is for mosquito protection, right? Now, what does that have to do with choice A? Rather, what does choice A have to do with that? So, whether the two chemicals provide any protection for the millipedes against its own predators, that doesn't tell you anything about why monkeys behave this way, right? So even without doing a variance test or a yes no test, you could reject choices like this, which are clearly wrong. But if you want to apply the variance test and go the yes no direction, you can absolutely do that. So if I go the yes, the two chemicals provide protection for millipedes against their own protectors, you would still say it's irrelevant to the argument. It's irrelevant to what you're trying to do. Even if yes, those chemicals provide protection for the millipedes themselves, why are the monkeys rubbing the millipedes into the fur? Is it for the mosquito protection? We don't know. And likewise, even if these chemicals don't provide any protection to millipedes, are the monkeys using that for the protection against mosquitoes? We don't know, right? That's about it. Choice B also, I think you can instantly see it should be irrelevant. Why is that? Whether the type of millipede is found in other parts of the world. Again, maybe this millipede is found in other parts of the world, maybe this is not. Either way, it doesn't tell you why the monkeys are rubbing these millipedes into their fur, right? So that's why B should be wrong. And I do see a question. Hey, Naman, rejected it. I rejected choice A because it's already given that those chemicals. Um, I wouldn't reject it for that reason. Good question, Naman. I would not reject it for that reason because it's, it's given to you, of course, that the mosquitoes are, it's repellent to mosquitoes. But choice A tells you nothing about mosquitoes, right? It's about protecting the millipede from its predators. I don't think those might be mosquitoes in any context. Could be, I don't know. I hope you see that that should not be the reason. That if you say that I'm rejecting this choice because I already know protection. I mean, these things are these chemicals are repellent to mosquitoes. That has nothing to do with what choice A is trying to do, right? If you say choice A says yes, the two chemicals provide protection for millipedes against their own predators. Are those mosquitoes? We don't know. So, what does that point about mosquito repellents have to do with predators of millipedes? I don't think it does. So, the reasoning ideally should be something along these lines. Hope that helps, but that's a great question. So, let's look at choice C, which is also easy to reject, whether animals other than capuchins rub insects of any kind into their fur. Now, in an easy question like this, most of us will instantly reject this saying what happens with other animals is irrelevant. In this case, it is truly relevant, but just because your argument is telling is your choice is talking about an entity which is completely different, don't just assume it's irrelevant. You have to logically see, is it really irrelevant for this argument? In this case, it is. What other species do does not explain why these capuchin monkeys rub millipedes. Yeah. Mostly we had choice A, choice D, a couple of choices. I hope that's clear. Most of us did choose choice D. I'm happy to see that, but I hope you also see why it works. Also observe this is in line with one of those flaws that we could come up with. Okay, that's good. Whether the only time millipoids are readily available is during rainy season. If yes, what does this mean? If the answer is yes, that means millipedes are readily available to Capuchins only during the rainy season. Then the fact that they are rubbing millipedes into their fur only during rainy season, it might not be because of mosquito repellents. It might be because that's the only time they get these things. That's the only time the monkeys are able to find these millipedes. To give you a very weird example here, maybe these millipedes have excellent fur moisturizing properties. And if it was available year round, the Capuchin monkeys would be happy to keep moisturizing their fur. The problem is it's available only during this time. And in that case, it has nothing to do with your argument. It has nothing to do with the mosquito repellents. So you can see that the yes side should weaken, and the no side says this millipede is available year round. This millipede is available year round, but it so happens that the Capuchin monkeys only rub these millipedes into their fur during the rainy season when mosquitoes are in peak. That kind of makes you believe that yes, it really might be about the mosquitoes. So I hope you see that one side strengthens, the other side weakens. Yeah. So I think E nobody chose. I'm going to skip that in the interest of time. Let's keep moving. But I hope this was a quick run through of the entire process at work. Now, the second question, most of us chose the right answer, which is A. I did see a couple of D's as well. So we're going to discuss that as well. But let me put it to you. Let me give that to you as an exercise. What is the plan? What is the goal? And is there any flaw that you see? If the plan and goal are clear, just let me know what flaw do you see in the argument. Even that would be great. I'm especially interested in seeing if you're crystal clear in figuring out the plan and goal. That's more important. The flaw is it would be nice. Fantastic. So, what you guys are doing here in the comment section, I want you to do this before you go to read the question stem when you're reading your argument. Once you've read the argument, just before you go start reading this, why not take a few seconds, make sure, be crystal clear what is the plan, be crystal clear what is the goal of the plan. It can help. So the plan is, of course, to increase market share. The plan is to do deep discounting of the vehicles for the next several months. The goal is, of course, stated to you explicitly, we want to increase market share. Now, one of the potential flaw, I like the answer there. What if rivals give more discounts? Yeah, of course. Great. Plan deep discounting. Very good, very good. Vikalp, Haman, Naman, all of you. Great participation. Fantastic. So just be clear about this. What is the plan? Deep discounting of vehicles for the next several months. What is the goal? Increase your market share. And also make sure you understand the logic here. What's the plan? What does the car maker, automaker hope to achieve? They don't mind the cut in profit. They know that profit is going to get cut, but because of the heavy level of advertising that they're going to push out, the hope is that you'll be able to attract buyers from rival manufacturers' cars, and in the long run, those people who you kind of drag in, attract you. The hope is that they'll stay and they'll become loyal customers. That should lead to more market share, right? Because you've taken more of the pie. Now, as you read this, I think intuitively you might be able to figure out what are the flaws in this plan. Everything here lies on hope, right? Just because you offer deep discounts, just because you advertise like a madman, does it mean that people will just switch? For instance, what if your quality is very poor, that nobody wants to buy your product, even if you go deep discount? right? So what if for some reason buyers do not get attracted? That's a flaw. What if for some reason, even if buyers got initially attracted, maybe, just maybe, they are so price sensitive, at the drop of the hat, they will move to somebody else who offers a cheaper product. In other words, these guys cannot be expected to be loyal, right? Because then also the plan would fail. So, given such scenarios, how could we still expect an increase in market share? So, these are the potential flaws. So, RY says flaw, another reason other than price won't cause long term customers. Yeah, fairly easy, right? You're right. You're right. Apart from price, is there something else which could impact this equation? It will work. Now, plan goal. This for me is an optional, useful step. If you can, it should flow naturally. If you've done enough on-time practice where you're not rushing to the choices, you're trying to grapple with the arguments. Some of this will come naturally. Otherwise, always go to choices. You should be able to crack it. But build clarity on what you need to do. Find a choice. What do we need to do? We need to find that choice which best among the choices, it should best help us assess the plan's chances of achieving its aim. And again, when you're reading this to yourself, what is the plan? Deep discounting. What is the aim? Increase in market share. Let that be crystal clear, framed in your head. Okay, that's good. Now, most of us got this right. Again, if what we need to do is clear, let's look at choices. I saw only two choices that were chosen, A and D, so I'll primarily stick to that. So, choice A says whether the automakers' competitors are likely to respond by offering deep discounts on their own products. Now, this is very real life. Again, all of CR is real life. Uh, this is when Amazon entered India and Flipkart also started giving a lot of discounts, right? In order to fight with Amazon. Same stuff. Potential flaw with the plan, it's kind of in line with that. But you see, if the rivals also match those discounts, do you really have a price advantage? Can you really expect people to, get attracted to you and switch from the rival companies? Not really. So it has a weakening impact. On the other hand, you're the only one who's offering this kind of crazy discount. Nobody else is doing it. You really might actually poach a few customers, right? So it has a strengthening impact. Now, choice C is an interesting choice where sometimes I do see some discussion. While some of the automakers' models will be more, whether some of the automakers' models will be more deeply discounted. Think about the scenario. Maybe there are 10 models and some models will have a 70% discount, which is crazy, and some models will have a 40% discount. Does it matter? Either way. So this is your yes scenario, and the no scenario is, let's say both of them give 40% discount. It should not matter, right? Whether it's a yes or no, even if there's a 70% or 40% difference, at the end of the day, all these models have deep discounts. The the automaker is providing deep discount overall, right? So it should have no impact. So choice D was chosen by one or two of you. So it says whether the automaker will be able to cut costs sufficiently to maintain profit margins even when the discounts are in effect. Very interesting. This is where you have to go back to the passage and see the attention, pay attention to the details. The author already acknowledges, right? And in fact, what it means is the manufacturer, the car manufacturer, is already okay. They already acknowledges the fact that profit wise we are going to take a hit. That's not a problem here. The point is the argument already acknowledges that profit is going to get cut in some way or the other. That does not tell you anything about the actual goal, which is market share. Your profit could take a hit. So maybe the answer is yes, maybe the answer is no. In the case of yes, maybe they'll still be able to make some profit, maintain their profit margin. If the answer is no, there's no way they'll be able to make profit. That profit margin is going to get cut. Even in both cases, none of this has anything to do with what you're trying to do, which is increase market share, right? So even in the case that you're not going to get able to maintain your profits, you could still increase your market share. This is what Amazon did in India for a long time. In fact, the e-commerce thing is still not profitable, I guess, but they were doing deep discounting for a long time till they hit incredible market share, right? So I hope this helps. Yep, absolutely. The 13486, you're absolutely right. Chalo. Now let's talk about. Let's just summarize what the process was. Now everything that I marked in yellow is important to me, right? Now these things, being able to identify the flaw, it's very good if you can do it. But sometimes the brain may not do that, and then you can of course still solve the question, right? It doesn't matter as much. But what I want you to take away is this. Once you have read the argument, first read very carefully. It's useful to sometimes pause sentence by sentence to ensure that you're internalizing the idea as well. But once you've understood what you have read, once you have built an understanding of what you have read, just have a checkpoint. Just ensure that the plan is clear, the goal is clear in those kinds of questions, the conclusion and the support is clear in those kinds of questions. Now, here there's an additional tip. Sometimes it pays to be very, very, very exact with the conclusion. It pays to spend a few extra seconds on the conclusion. I really mean it when I say if you spend a little effort upstream, you can avoid a lot of pain downstream. Clarity on conclusion is one of the most important things in all argument based questions, right? Now, the other thing I really want to ensure is that you always frame what is required. You take some effort to really be crystal clear on what is it you need to do. And again, that's going to help you with the tougher questions. Now, where appropriate, you can use the yes no test. Some choices you can see from a mile away. One of the things which will help you come very difficult questions is you take a choice, you really have to be able to connect it to what you're trying to do. And this needs a little bit of rigor with the tougher questions. We'll come to that. The only other point here from a process perspective is the general observation that we all have. Just because you read something doesn't mean it went into your brain. So that applies to answer choices as well. You might have read that answer choice. Doesn't mean you understood the answer choice. Some sentences will seep into your brain beautifully, some sentences won't. And sometimes those would be answer choices as well. One of the real mistakes that I see happen quite often is we read a choice, we believe we understood the choice, we jump directly to analysis. We're just short circuiting the process there. Sometimes what you have to do is you have to read a choice, take a step back, take a pause, figure out what the choice is really trying to tell you. Then when you do the analysis, it will click. Okay. So easy to say, not that easy to execute, but a lot of times when people are struggling, I see people who have cracked 655 and try to go to 705. Sometimes the problem is here. Sometimes you have to fix these issues. Okay. So here is question 3. That's enough theory. I think I've done with most of the theory. From now on, mostly we'll do a lot of muscle building through practice. Let me know what the answer is once you're done. Yeah, good to see answers coming in. We'll wait for maybe 30 seconds more just to see if there are any more of you. Nice. All right, let's move. Let's move. This is good. Happy to see that all of you chose B. B is, of course, the right answer. The first part of this career, right? Yeah, it's talking about early in his career. So that's essentially the first part of his career. Now, what defines how many years is career? I mean, how many years is that first part? We don't know. How many years is early? How many years early? We don't know. But remember, these answers should only either increase or decrease your belief, or at some level help you do what you want. They don't need to be perfect. Okay. So fine. Let's discuss this. Now, very interestingly, I like to call this a third type of evaluate, which is not strictly argument based, not strictly plan based, but somewhere in between, or not somewhere in between, but something else entirely. Uh, those are a lot of these questions still fall under the evaluate bucket because there is an aspect of evaluation that you have to do. In this case, with the choices, with each of these choices will tell you one way or the other what to do, right? But if you look at a question like this, now, of course, sitting right here, you know that we are doing evaluate questions. But in the exam or when you're doing a mixed bag time set, I hope you'll also be able to recognize what you need to do for such questions. And you don't need to go and break your head to figure out that this is an evaluate type question. Absolutely not necessary. Read what is given, read what is asked, execute. Okay. So what do we need to know? In some of these questions are not some of the questions that you'll see which fall under this big bucket called evaluate, not necessarily argument or plan based, which means you have to absolutely be very careful with the question stem, particularly to figure out what is it exactly you need from this question, what is it you're supposed to do, right? Quite often you'll see something like this where you're asked to evaluate the given choice in terms of some specific objective. Does this choice do that objective? Does it at least help you choose between two things, so on and so forth? Uh, question is an example. There are quite a few of this, and there are more complex cases of this. This one is a medium level question. This one, if you guys are wondering, if you go on C on GMAT Club, this one is a 605 level question. Medium, but there are slightly harder versions also that touch upon a very similar idea. Yeah. So I hope you guys spend time understanding what is being told here. Excavation of a house of a third century. So we're talking about ancient times. Third century Cameronian official. It revealed that this guy had four magistrates. So this guy worked, guy or girl, this guy worked for four different magistrates, right? And this happened in four different cities. However, given the system of that era, what's unclear is whether he served them simultaneously or he did so sequentially. So there are two possibilities as to what his working pattern was. It's possible that, for example, he worked in one place for 3 months, the other magistrate for another 3 months, and so on and so forth. He could have worked for four different guys in 1 year. In other words, he could have worked simultaneously for everyone in every year, or what you typically expect with work experience, right? You work for one guy for 8 years, then you work for another guy for 7 years, and so one at a time. The question is asking us, and it's very interesting the way the question is phrased. Which of the following, if found in the excavation, so assume that whatever choice you're dealing with, it is actually found in the excavation, which of this is most likely to help you reveal the pattern. And what do you mean by pattern? Did he work simultaneously or did he work one at a time? So which of these choices will help us figure out what is that pattern, right? Yep. So choice A, maps and documents describing each of the provincial capitals. I mean, I can see that you guys are clear with this. It does not help, right? Because whether the official works simultaneously or one at a time, it's very reasonable that he would have maps and documents of each of those places, right? So the map doesn't tell you when he worked, right? When he worked where. We just found maps in the excavation. That doesn't help. Choice B is very interesting because I hope you guys are able to see how this should help. Because when you say a cache of the documents related to work from early in his career, let's say the first 5 years, just for example, if he was working simultaneously in these 5 years for all the four guys, then you would expect to see documents from all the four magistrates from all those places of work, right? And therefore, this in one direction. Either we would see two things. Either we would see that documents from all the four magistrates are there, which would suggest that he was working simultaneously, or one or maximum two, depending on how many years he worked, one or two magistrates, those documents would be available, which suggests that he's probably working one at a time. So you can see why choice B definitely helps. I hope that also clears up. I didn't see you guys struggle with any of the choices. Very quickly, let me know if there's any other choice that you want me to touch upon. Else, we'll just go to the next question and keep building from this. So, in any case, at some point the PDF will be shared if you guys want to go through the logic of it. It's always written here for most of these questions, just in case we don't cover it here. But I hope you see. Some people do struggle with a choice like D, but even D, right? Several pieces of furniture in the styles, it does not help. Now, even if the official worked simultaneously or maybe work one at a time, you would expect that he would actually eventually have some furniture from multiple places, right? It doesn't give you a sense of the pattern. Sure, the one. Happy to. So in this case, maybe it doesn't fit your plan goal and that or conclusion reasoning as much, but otherwise everything remains the same. Read what is given carefully, build a solid understanding, understand the key ideas well, really pay attention to what you need to do. This will become mission critical, and then just pass through the choices. And you'll see that a lot of choices will be easy to reject. Right? Cool. So let's take it up a notch, slightly more interesting questions. I mean, these are all interesting, but slightly more nuanced, let's say. Let's see how you guys do. This is one of my old favorites. Okay, I see most of you are done. I'll give you another 20 seconds odd for this. Nice. Cool. Fantastic. Happy to see most of you choose E, which is, of course, the right answer. Now, again, this is a medium question, but the final point here is you really have to be careful with what you need to do. So, two trick points here. You have to realize that this is an evaluate except question, right? So, you need to find the exception, not the rule. Uh, so, if anything, I hope that me hammering again and again this point that you need to read the question stem carefully, I hope that is really ingrained at this point, if it was not already there, right? Uh, so, yeah, firstly, it's an evaluate except question. Second, you really have to read this portion. Exactly what is it you need? Yeah. So, with this, let's kind of do the next question as well. This is a set of two. This is, of course, E, and we'll come to it. Let's do the next one. I guess most of you are done. I'm going to give you another 15 seconds just in case there's more of you. But this one is a 700 level question. Sits in the 655 to 705 category. Of course, it's also a very popular question. I'm sure some of you might have solved it before as well. But you guys are doing fantastic today. All right. So, very quickly, with question 4, this is the Tanko leather question. Um, I hope all of you really paid attention to this. And one of the ways I like to understand the data I'm reading a little better is to put myself in the shoes of that company or person or author if necessary. Sometimes it helps you really uh, get in and understand stuff really well. So we'll come to D as well. D is a good trap choice, in fact. So, for instance, as far as this question goes, firstly, let's understand it together just in case. Tanco, Tanco is a leather manufacturer, all right, uses large quantities of common salt to preserve animal hides. Okay, so animal hides, animal skin, it uses a large quantity of salt to preserve that. Now, the problem is environmental regulations have significantly increased the cost of disposing the salt water, which results from this preservation use. And as a result, Tanco is considering a plan. So it's not a done deal, it's just a plan that's under consideration. The plan is to use potassium chloride instead of sodium chloride. So, what is the plan which is being considered using my apologies for using old scientific notation. It the engineer in me came out by accident there when I was writing this. The plan is to use KCl instead of NaCl, or in other words, use potassium chloride instead of sodium chloride. Yeah. Now, research has shown that Tanco could reprocess the byproduct of potassium chloride to yield a crop fertilizer, leaving a relatively small volume of waste for disposal. So, what's really the benefit? What's the angle here? The problem is the disposal of salt water. It's clearly cost intensive given the environmental regulations. It's increasingly getting more costly. The advantage here is that you will have lesser volume of waste for disposal, so it should cost less ideally. That's the hope, right? But what's the question? In determining the impact on company profits of this particular plan, which is using potassium chloride in place of sodium chloride, it would be important for Tanco to research all of the following except what? That's the question. So imagine you are that guy who's working for the strategy team at Tanco. I'm sure a lot of you guys would be doing things like this. Perhaps not at leather companies, but yeah. So imagine you work at Tanco. You're a strategy guy there. You're considering using potassium chloride instead of sodium chloride. For you, what would be more important for you to study? But in terms of what? In terms of impact on profit. So if you do the switch to potassium chloride from sodium chloride, what could be the impact of profit of these choices? And it's an accept question. So you will find 4 choices that have a very tangible, clear potential impact on profit, which you should reject. The one exception should be your correct choice, right? So yeah, let's come to parsing through the choices. So I think here the choices are very straightforward. I don't think it's too much of a point, but the real way to process this is you're trying to see if by any chance is there a tangible impact on profit. And even these choices, you can take it to 2 directions if you really observe it in most cases. So what difference is there between the cost of common salt needed to preserve a given quantity and the cost of potassium chloride needed to preserve the same quantity? Think about it. If there is no difference, then it may not really matter that much. The impact on profit is minimal. But if there is a clear and strong difference, then there is going to be a positive or a negative impact on profit. In other words, there's a clear connect, tangible connect to profit, and therefore this is relevant. And how is it connecting to profit? In terms of cost. Remember, profit is equal to revenue minus cost. Now, choice B is very similar. It's telling you about processing cost and the equipment involved in. If it is suitable, if the equipment is suitable, then you may not have to incur too much of a cost. But if the equipment is not suitable, you'll end up incurring a certain level of cost. So clearly, thanks to the cost angle, it's relevant to profit. Choice C is something similar. The argument, the passage already establishes that sodium chloride waste has a high disposal cost. Then the only question is, would the same kind of rules apply for potassium chloride? In which case, definitely you're going to see an improvement because lesser waste is being disposed. Otherwise, it might be different. But clearly, there is a economic impact in terms of profit, again through cost. Choice D is interesting because it's the one choice here that looks at revenue rather than cost. So if the leather resembles the sodium chloride leather, the leather which was say preserved using sodium chloride, great. You should be able to sell it at the same price point. But otherwise, it might have an impact on the price. Will people be ready to pay so much if the quality is a bit different? Those are questions that you should ask. So clearly, if you're the research team, you should be figuring all of this out before you roll out this thing. Yeah, before you roll out sodium chloride. potassium chloride. And I was happy to see most of you, all of you choose E. Whether the chemical mechanism or those properties which make potassium chloride effective are the same as with sodium chloride or not doesn't matter as long as it works, right? So there's no tangible impact on your actual revenue or cost and therefore by extension profit. Cool. Let's look at the question where I do see some discussion, right? Uh, Firstly, is the argument clear? Anybody has doubts on the arguments, just let me know. But in any case, I will also run through it just to ensure, because there's been some discussion here. There is a certain cultivated herb. Let's call it herb X for clarity. So herb X is one of a group of closely related plants that thrive in soils. So you have herb X, which is a part of a group of plants that somehow are able to absolutely thrive in toxic metal rich soils. Interesting. Now, agronomists studying the growth of this herb, they've discovered something. They've discovered that this particular herb produces large amounts of histidine. Okay. And what's so great about histidine? It's an amino acid that, under test tube conditions, it kind of neutralizes or makes chemically inert those metals. Interesting. And based on this fact that histidine, at least in test tube or lab conditions, is able to do this, the author goes on to conclude that the high histidine production must be the key feature. And I also want you to always keep an eye for such strong language. It has to be this, it has to be this. So the author is making a claim here that the reason herb X has such tolerance, it's able to grow so well in metal rich soils, it has to do with the high histidine production. So the high histidine production is the reason for the fact that the herb X is able to grow in those toxic metal rich soils. Yeah. So I hope this is clear. So we'll come to that. I hope and again, as always, the conclusion should be clear. The logical reasoning with supporting the conclusion should be clear. Now, one of the things that came to my mind as I was thinking about this is, does the impact in test tube conditions or laboratory conditions, does it translate to real life? Can I consider what happens in test tube settings to be what will happen, on the ground with this plant and in the metal rich soil? Sadly, this was not one of the answer choices. This is not part of the answer choice, which will happen as the questions get tougher. Maybe it will be the case quite often that what you are able to arrive at naturally is not an answer choice. The answer choice will have, the correct answer choice will be on some other logic, right? And that's perfectly normal. It's okay. But what is it we need to do? We need to find the choice that best helps us determine if indeed herb X's high histidine production is the reason for the plant's ability to grow well in metal rich soils. Yeah. So keep that framed in your brain and as we go to choices. Okay. So I do see quite a few questions on this one. Let me just take a peek there before we jump to the choices. Why not D? We are getting to D. We'll discuss that in detail because the question is not about the concentration of the metal in the soil. Yeah. So I hope the 13486, I hope the question is clear. What is it you need to do? What is it you're trying to assess? Is it really the case? We need some choice which will help us determine if indeed herb X's high histidine production is the reason for its ability to really grow well in metal rich soil. It should be that feature which allows it to grow well in metal rich soil. Yeah, that's point one. Naman's question is based on the previous question. So let me just take a peek there. Comparing effectiveness of leather if you use KCl. Yeah, very interesting. And that's where they're trying to get you, right? So effectiveness of leather if you use KCl and common salt. So it's telling you what are the properties that make it effective. Are they the same? It's not grading. You have to read the choice carefully. I think this is a case of you reading the choice but not completely understanding the choice. Um, think about what the choice exactly says. Are the chemical properties that make potassium chloride an effective means of preserving animal height the exact same as those that make common salt an effective means? If you really think about it, it's telling you that both are effective. But are the properties that make it effective the same? That doesn't matter, right? As long as both are effective, that should not matter. If the choice told you that in one case it's more effective than the other, that would be interesting, because based on the effectiveness factor there would be a cost or revenue implication. So I hope you see that. Yeah, so this is about your discipline and rigor in reading, but making sure you've understood the choice. You have to slow down. Naman, I hope that helps. Yeah, but very, very good that you're bringing these things to it. It is a misread. So this is why I usually take a quick pause after I read to ensure that I've really understood what the choice is trying to say. I don't want to rush this stage. Okay. Yeah. The one, absolutely. B is the right answer for we coming back to our question. B is the right answer. Um, but the logic of that, but what we are trying to conclude is this. What we are trying to assess is this conclusion, which is not about the other herbs. So we'll discuss that. Yeah. B is the most logical answer. I do see another question there. If this herb reduces the mix, we'll come to that. That's about choice D, right? So now I'm going to discuss all the choices. But I see there's been some debate on this. So good, let's discuss. So what we need to do is very clear. We need to find a choice which best, absolutely must be the best choice as far as assessing whether or not this particular herb's high histidine production is the reason this particular herb is able to grow well in metal rich soils. Be very clear. Okay. So let's look at choice A. Whether the herb can thrive in soils that do not have high concentrations of the toxic metals. This one should be fairly easy to reject. It should be irrelevant. Why is that? What is the argument about? And again, what matters is your discipline in connecting it to what you're trying to do. Your argument is about whether, in the case of herb X, the reason it's able to thrive in metal rich soils is the high histidine productions. Do we really care about whether or not this herb is able to survive in the other type of soil, which does not have high concentration? That should not matter, right? That tells you nothing about. So, choice A, whether it's a yes or a no, it tells you nothing about how come the herb X is able to thrive in the metal rich soils. So, you're not getting an answer to that. Yeah. Now, let's look at choice B. Right now, choice B is a very interesting choice. Even though the conclusion that you're trying to assess, the argument that you're trying to assess is about that particular herb and not the group overall, choice B, even though it's talking about the group overall, is actually correct. And what's the logic? Just observe this. Two directions. Whether others of the closely related group of plants also produce histidine in large amounts. Remember, this entire group, which is X, A, and B, all of them are able to survive and thrive in metal rich soils. Think about that. So, if the answer to this question is yes, so yes, even the other plants in this group, which is A and B, are absolutely able to survive and thrive in metal rich soil. Then it really makes you believe that histidine must be that factor, right? Because what is common? What do we know about all these plants in this particular group? All of them are absolutely killing it in this metal rich toxic soil. They're able to thrive in this metal rich toxic soils. What is common to all of them now? Histidine. So that kind of builds the case that, yeah, perhaps it's really histidine. That's the factor that enables these plants, all of these plants, to grow well in metal rich soils. So, if anything, this should strengthen your belief in the argument. Now, take it the other way. If histidine was the reason, right? How come those other plants which do not have histidine are also able to thrive? Remember, whether it's not just this herb which is able to thrive in the toxic metal rich soil, it's all of these plants. It's X, it is A, it is B. Really, if histidine was the reason it's able to thrive, The other plants don't have histidine. How come they're thriving? So choice B on the no side actually makes you doubt whether histidine is the common factor. It seems it might be something else which is actually common to X, A, and B. It might be some other chemical. So all of you, is choice B clear? So what happens is, this is actually a 705, I mean 655 705 level question. So what's the erstwhile 700 level question? A lot of times I see people going wrong in a choice like this, just because, hey, the argument is about herb X in particular, but choice B is talking about the other guys. How is that relevant? You have to go deeper than that. You have to see how it connects with your argument. Take the yes no, see what's happening. So I hope this is clear. Now let's look at choice C as well. Whether the herb's high level of histidine production is associated with an unusually low level of production of some other amino acid. This should be easy to reject on one point, which is, what is this amino acid? What function does it play in this entire equation with regard to being the growth in the metal rich soil? There's no clue, there's no context to this, right? A low level of some other chemical, it doesn't tell us one way or the other anything about whether histidine is a reason this particular herb is able to grow. So I hope C is also clear. You should be able to reject this. We're keeping this on hold. Now, this choice was also debated. I do see a couple of you asked about it. So let's talk about choice D. And this is where, again, if you're able to really connect with what you're trying to do, you might be able to see this almost instantly. Choice D says whether growing the herb in soil with high concentrations will over time reduce the concentrations of those metals in the soil. If you really think about it, you know what's interesting about this choice? It tells you nothing about histidine. So this could be any other chemical in that plant which is doing this. So that plant might have something. Let's say that chemical Y or something. It could be some other chemical Y which is actually doing something to the metal concentration in the soil. Which is why if you grow that herb for a prolonged period, it's going to reduce the concentration of those metals in the soil. Notice that choice D tells you nothing about histidine. Do you know whether this is the impact of histidine? Which is what we need to gauge, right? Really, is histidine the cause of, you know, the plant being able to do well in toxic metal rich soils? So any comments, guys, on this? Is the idea of D coming through? And also I showed you the variance test here just in case, because I do know that this is a trap choice. If you say yes to this question, yes, growing the herb in soil with high concentrations will over time reduce that concentration in the soil. So when the herb is grown, the question is, okay, clearly that plant is doing something to the metals in the soil. Somehow when you're growing that plant, the metal level is coming down in the soil over a period of time. But is it because of histidine? And we don't know. It's anybody's guess. If it's not because of histidine, how can we? It doesn't really tell us anything to support this idea, or the other way as well. And even if the answer is no, we have no idea about the actual impact of histidine. So these are very clever choices. I think if I remember right, D is like the most popular incorrect choice for this. But again, being able to really connect it to what you're trying to do, does it really help you do that? Assess that exact thing you're trying to assess. That's where it's going to help you. Great, Ratan. Good to see that. Now, let's look at choice E. Whether the concentration of histidine in the growing herb declines as the plant approaches maturity. Again, it's irrelevant. When I was reading this, my brain thought of what we have in our bodies, like testosterone, right? Now, as we grow old, as we mature, let's say, this chemical is going to go down in our body. That doesn't tell you anything about what the chemical did. In a similar vein, yeah, maybe the concentration of histidine in the growing herb, it declines as the plant grows older. Great. It doesn't tell you anything about whether it is this histidine itself which enabled it to keep growing in those metal rich soils. It doesn't tell you that. So I hope you see even E is irrelevant. B is the only legitimate candidate here. But good. Are we ready to take it to the next level? I have a couple of 705s if you guys are ready. Great. Let's move. Let's move. Let's do two more questions and then we'll wrap up. Uh, let's see. In any case, when I share this PDF with you, there will be quite a few other questions there as official questions just for you to try your hand at. Some of them are from the current guide, some of them are older, but it's for your practice. If you have doubts in any of it, happy to try and help you. All right. Cool. Let's move. Ah, mostly A's, one C and one, I mean, a couple of C's in fact. As I was mentioning that there's another, yeah, it's a causal argument, absolutely. So there are a couple of C's there, a couple of A's, I mean, quite a few A's. Uh, I like what Naman has said, right? Looks good, but not able to reject C convincingly. We'll work on that also. We'll see which one. All right, let's take another 10 seconds. It looks like most of you are done. So this time it's almost a split jury. It's like roughly 55% A and 40%, 45% C. Fair. A is not telling us about the promotion helped. Okay. A lot of debate on this. Good. We'll come back to all of that. Meanwhile, guys, let's do the last question of the day, and then just we'll wrap it up with a quick discussion, and I'll summarize all our takeaways as well. Here you go. All right. I see most of you are putting in your answers. This one is overwhelmingly towards C. That's good. Interesting. Yeah, C, 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 C. Okay. I was trying to evaluate D. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's good that you're, catching your failure points. For me, uh, a session like this is meant to build a certain level of conceptual clarity, give you a bit of practice, and it will build a bit of comfort. Beyond this, as you practice questions on your own, which anyway you guys would be doing at this point, when you review well, when you start reviewing really, really well, um, you will start seeing faltering points. You will start observing patterns in terms of, you know, for example, you talked about causality, that's a pattern. Then there's some quantitative kind of patterns. So all of that learning is there for the taking, provided you review. Uh, with regard to verbal, whether it's here or RC, one of the things I insist with students is review every choice. Don't, even if you felt that you absolutely crushed the answer choices in a question, if you're reviewing, review every single choice. Yeah. I really like D, but scared of all going for C. So don't worry about that. Yeah. Yeah. So mostly C for this question. I'll take that also. Uh, let's wrap up this question and then come back to the XT gasoline one, because this one there seems to be a lot more alignment. Yeah. So let's talk about the list of hospitals questions. Yeah. What's given? Lists of hospitals have been compiled showing which hospitals have patient death rates exceeding the national average. So think about patient death rate. For every, let's say, 100 patients, how many end up dead? This could be zero point 0.1, this could be 1, this could be 10, I don't know, whatever the percentage is, right? So the lists of hospitals have been made which show which hospitals have patient death rates which exceed the national average. Okay. The data have been adjusted to allow for differences in the ages of patients. So I'm happy to see a lot of you paid really good attention to this, because that actually makes your choice C right. Right? Um, what does it mean? And I had to really spend time if this is not seep in initially. The data have been adjusted to allow for differences in the age of patients. It means don't give the excuse. If you're a hospital, you cannot give the excuse that you're getting people of a certain age group where they're more likely to end up dead, right? You can't give that excuse. All those age differences have been adjusted for, right? That's what this particular sentence means. Now, what is the ask? Each of the following, if true, okay, provides a good logical ground for hospitals to object to interpreting rank on these lists as one of the indices of the quality of hospital care, except. So, on the first read, this looks a little irritating, but just have to spend a bit of time and figure out. So, each of the following, if true, provides a solid logical ground for hospitals to object. So, in other words, 4 out of these choices will give you, if you are the hospital, it will give you a proper, legitimate reason to object about using these rankings as a measure of quality. There's one choice which will not be a valid objection. So, what we have to do, I hope, is clear. Now, and each of these choices, you start processing it, you see that there is some relevance, there is you could make this a very valid objection, right? So if you say rank order might indicate insignificant differences rather than large differences in a number of patient in numbers of patient deaths, let's understand. For example, if rank 1 has 0.1 percentage of mortality of patient deaths happening, and rank 100 has 0.11 percentage mortality, maybe a very insignificant difference in the context of things, but here you go, one hospital is ranked 1 and another hospital is ranked 100, right? So would just because the values are so close by but the rankings seem to vary a lot, from 1 to all the way 100, let's say, this list is kind of meaningless, is it not? How can you judge quality based on this, right? Even if you got a rank 100 here, it doesn't mean you're bad at all. Compared to the first rank 1 who got 0.1%, you're still awesome, right? That's why choice A should not be a valid choice here, because it presents a very valid objection. It's a good ground for objection. Now, if I look at choice B, patients that keep hospitals that keep patients longer are likely to have death rates than those that discharge patients early but do not record deaths of patients. Yet again, this is clearly a valid objection, right? So if a good hospital keeps a dying patient comfortable and a bad hospital really kicks them out to die at home, this list is biased, right? Again, it points to you being able to object to using this list as a measure of hospital quality. Now, choice C works especially particularly because of this. Otherwise, if not for this sentence, a choice like C would never work, because they haven't. Otherwise, you could raise the question, right? Maybe some of these hospitals are avoiding the very old people who might end up dead a lot more, right? But that's, you can't argue that way because the data has been adjusted for differences in ages, right? So age is already accounted for. So citing age as a reason is incorrect. You should not be doing it. So you don't have grounds for objection here, which is why this is a legit choice. Now, I can see that D was a well liked option. At least 2 of you I see liked D. Whether or not you chose D because you saw everybody going for C, D was kind of interesting. Some hospitals serve a larger proportion of low income patients who tend to be more seriously ill when admitted to hospital. Yeah. Now, this will seem interesting if you have not seen C. I mean, if you have not understood the sentence or did not process the sentence. Otherwise, absolutely no way. So, if a hospital has a tendency to take in those people who are more seriously ill, there is absolutely a chance that the death rate will be higher. You are your sample has a, I mean, the people you're taking in have a higher proclivity, have a higher chance of, getting dead than some other hospital, then you will end up having a higher death rate. That again makes these rankings kind of useless, right? Because there's a lot of bias in that list now. So this also is a good ground for objection. Yeah. So any doubts on this question? I didn't see anyone choose E, so that's why I'm not getting into E. So, but just checking. We'll see for you. Yeah, yeah, you're laughing. Okay. Oh, that was a smiley. Oh man, that's so nice. That's so interesting. Oh, it was the XD symbol. Yeah, I get it, man. I get it. Sure. It looked so much like D. I assumed it was T. But there was another student who was interested in T. So I think the discussion was still useful that way. Let's move now to that question. This is a question where I do see that we had roughly 50% accuracy, around 55% accuracy, roughly. So, and it was a complete full, it was a toss between A and C. So we will discuss both. Now, as far as the argument is concerned, I think it's fairly easy to understand and visualize, but let's do that. So last August, so for example, let's say August 2025. So last August, the Exteg chain of gasoline stations, they had a temporary sales promotion. So temporarily they had the sales promotion happening. What is a sales promotion? Any customer who made a purchase of 10 or more gallons gets a free car wash. Oh, that's good. Fine. For the month of August, okay, XT experienced a 10% increase in gasoline sales as compared to sales in August of the previous year. So the comparison is with previous year August. So sales has increased by 10%. Yeah. Okay. Actually, these two questions, the two questions we're discussing now, at least on GC, they are sitting at 705 levels. So both of these are not easy on paper. Of course, there are a lot of more difficult questions as well. But these are as per the test taking population that is represented on GMAT Club. These are 705 level questions. It's a pretty good sample because on GMAT Club, typically you see a lot more serious aspirants compared to the broader universe size. So definitely it's on the tougher side. These last two questions are on the tougher side. The histidine question is also 700 level question. It sits at 655 to 705. Some of the choices are tricky there. This one is 705 precisely because of the confusion between A and C. Those are the two popular choices. And the accuracy that we have seen in this group today, it's actually what it's kind of what you see on GMAT Club as well. It's around 58%, 53% or something like that. So this one was tough for this group too. Okay. So I think the argument is clear so far. So sales promotion was in effect. What is a sales promotion is clear. What is the observation? Hey man, in this August 2025, we had the sales promotion ongoing. It's a temporary thing, doesn't always happen. And what did we observe? We saw a 10% increase of sales compared to last August. So August to August comparison is happening. Yeah. Now, based on this, the author is concluding, and the conclusion is here. The promotion was successful as a means of boosting sales. Okay, what does that mean? In other words, the sales promotion was successful as a means of boosting sales. So it definitely contributed to the 10% sales increase. There is one point here I want to really make sure that you see. The conclusion is not that the sales promotion is the only reason for the boost in sales. Notice it is successful as a means of boosting sales. So don't, in this question it may not matter, but in a different question you'll absolutely fall for traps if you don't realize that the conclusion is very specific. The sales promotion was successful as a means of boosting sales. There could be other factors also which contributed to the 10%, but clearly, as per the author, this sales promotion definitely played a part. So I think the argument is clear. Sales promotion was successful as a means of boosting sales. The support is clear. On what basis is the author arriving at this conclusion? Simple. It's just one thing. I did a sales proportion. I did a sales promotion in this particular month. I saw a 10% increase compared to last August in that same month. Therefore, sales promotion definitely helpful. Simple argument. Now, this is a very simple argument to understand, and I think most of us intuitively can figure out potential flaws in this argument. And this is a causal argument. I mean, I think a lot of us commented on that, right? It is a causal argument. Um, so, is it possible that this 10% increase that has been observed is entirely because of some other cause, right? You notice my phrasing of entirely, it's because of the exact way the conclusion is phrased. The conclusion is that sales promotion was successful as a means. It definitely helped. So anything which says it could not have helped some other reason entirely, that's a flaw, right? And the example that came to mind to me when I was solving this is, okay, maybe the closing down of some competitor might have driven away this entire thing, right? Now, what is it we need? In evaluating the argument, it would be most helpful to answer which of the following. So, a question, the answer to which will help us determine if indeed this sales promotion can be credited with the observed increase in sales. Right? Very, very clear. Now, if you think about it for a second, I would love to know if, for example, did some competitor close down with some competitor company close down their business, which could have led to this kind of increase. That would help. Things like that would help. Now let's kind of pass through the choices. I saw a lot of debate here between A and C. So, for example, A looks good to me, but not able to reject C convincingly. A looks good to you. I'm happy. We'll discuss C as well. A is not telling us the promotion helped. Actually, it does, and we'll discuss that. And again, CR is very real life. Let me explain this through a simple example. Example one, and which is absolutely the relevant example here, is company versus industry. Now, it could be any industry, including gasoline. But imagine that you are in the mobile phone industry. You have your Apples and iPhones and Motorola's and all those guys. So all those brands are there, all those companies are there, Samsung's, and then you have the industry as a whole. Now, if your phone company grew by 10%, whereas the industry itself grew by 20%, what does that make you believe? That's important. The industry itself is doing fantastically. The industry was able to grow by 20%, but your company, despite doing a sales promotion, grew only by 10%. It should really make you believe a little less that that sales promotion did something for you, because the industry was anyway growing by 20%. You grew by only 10% despite doing a sales promotion which you claim has boosted sales. Really? You see how this has a weakening impact on the argument. Now take it the other way. Your company, whether it is a telephone company or it's gasoline, I'm just using that as an example, your company grew 10% in an industry which was able to grow only by 2%. Industry is struggling, nobody is buying this thing anymore, yet you were able to do well. You did 10%, you saw a 10% increase in sales. It increases belief that perhaps something you did, which in this context might mean the sales promotion, actually worked. Can you say with certainty that it is a sales promotion which worked? No. But the fact that industry could not do much, but in this period you were able to grow by such a high percentage, means that something you did might have clicked, might have been the sales promotion. So I hope this example is clear to you. Just let me know if this is coming through. Another example of the same company versus market dynamic is your stock market. If your stock market index grew by 20%, whereas a single company grew only by in the stock market grew by 20%, but an individual company grew only by 10%. The company is not doing well, right? So, is this idea clear of why A works? It's worded in a very weird way. When you say total combined gasoline sales for all gasoline stations, it's essentially the industry, right? It's all the players in the gasoline industry combined, gasoline station industry combined. So the whole industry is operating at grew by 20%. You were able to grow only by 10%. That should weaken, right? So this comparison with industry actually is useful. Everybody with me, I just want a quick show of hands just to ensure that choice A is clear, because then I'll move to the last choice C, which is I think the only other choice that was interesting. Yeah, good. So yeah. What else? What else? What else? So I hope to answer some of those questions. You see how this paints the picture that the sales promotion might have done this, right? Might have had an impact here. Now, choice B was easy to reject, especially if you observe that the conclusion is about sales, not about profit. Nobody cares about the profit. So the money earned, what was it used for? All of that, nothing matters. Let's talk about C. C is the interesting choice, right? Now, what's interesting about C is it's very close to being right. The problem with C is whichever way you look at it, whether you consider the yes case or the no case, it doesn't really tell you, it doesn't really suggest to you that the sales promotion actually caused an increase in sales. For example, let's take a simple example. Let's say there were 100 customers in total. Choice C on the yes direction would say, yes, were there any customers who bought 10 or more gallons at an XT gasoline station during the promotion who would have otherwise bought lower quantities but more frequently if the promotion had not been in effect? In other words, there are some people like this. Let's say out of those 100, there are 95 people who didn't really get touched by the promotion. There are 5 people who earlier used to buy 2 gallons at a time, but 5 times. 2 gallons at a time, 5 times. End of the day, they used to buy 10 gallons in total, right? Now, these guys are directly buying 10 gallons at one time. What I want you to observe is in both cases, he's still buying 10 gallons only, right? So, given the same pricing, the sales remains the same. That's what I mean by choice C. If you say that there are customers who, thanks to the promotion, change their purchase behavior, instead of buying 2 gallons 5 times in a month, suddenly these guys just went in one shot and bought 10 gallons. So these people change their purchase behavior. But all that tells me is thanks to the sales promotion, there was a change in the purchase behavior. That doesn't really say there's an increase in sales, because even the way it is phrased, the implication is earlier I used to buy 10 gallons enough through lower quantities but more frequently. Now I'm buying the same quantity in one stretch. Where is the sales increase? So choice C, even if you consider the yes side of it, saying there are such customers, it actually does not suggest that the sales promotion did anything for increasing sales. And if you consider the no case, there were no customers who were influenced by the sales promotion at all. So forget sales, they did not even change their purchase behavior. then again it tells you that the sales promotion presumably did nothing. So do you see, this doesn't help you assess whether or not the sales promotion actually helped boost sales, because irrespective of yes or no, what I'm seeing is, what does this have to do with sales? So is the idea here coming through? And this is the popular trap choice. So let me meanwhile look at other comments there. But let me know guys. Okay, I didn't read the, yeah, this we covered. Whenever there is a percentage argument, we always have to look for answers who's talking about overall base. Uh, Percentage is an entire discussion in itself. Aman, great question. Now, there's a lot of traps with regard to numbers and percentage. One of the common traps is about just because your percentage or proportion increased doesn't mean the absolute number increased. For example, your percentage might have increased because your denominator, the what goes at the base, decreased. That's a trap. Similarly, the vice versa is not true. Just because you saw an increase in the numerator, which is the absolute number, does not mean the denominator, does not mean the overall percentage decreased, increased or decreased. So those kinds of traps are very common. So there's quite a lot there to cover. Various questions cover small different aspects of it. Uh, but typically, if you look at percentage, you know, percentage is basically some numerator by denominator into some 100, right? So I would look at that mathematically. Yeah. What else? Yeah, I'm getting the right answer, but really for the wrong reasons. But every time. So lucky and not skillful. Absolutely happens with all of us. There are cases where I've felt lucky, and I have been lucky also, and vice versa, which is good to identify. All that tells me is your review process becomes more important. Once, because every time you review, you build some muscle. You understand what works, what doesn't work. For example, in this choice A, you got familiar with this particular pattern, which is this company versus market. You'll be surprised. I know at least one other question which has the same pattern. It's not really a pattern recognition game, the GMAT, not as much a pattern recognition game, but every time you review, you build something. So it will come. It will come. Right now, you're feeling lucky. Tomorrow, it will be entirely skill. Uh, for me, what matters is process of elimination. Okay. Don't worry about it. For answer A, I have a question regarding the yes case. Admitting the industry grew by 10%, maybe the promotion in fact helped, or maybe the company just followed an overall trend. Yeah. Don't worry about it. Yeah. If 10%, maybe the promotion in fact helped, or maybe the question just followed an overall trend. We can't distinguish. Yeah. The point is, you're right. We can't distinguish. If the industry grew by 10% and company also grew by 10%, then again you can't really say with any level of confidence that the sales promotion helped. And again, it falls into that weekend bucket for me, right? Because you're just following the trend. Whereas, what did your promotion really do? The industry itself grew by 10%, you also grew by 10%. What's so great about it? What did your promotion do? So even that case for me is actually making me believe a little less in the sales promotion. So yeah, great question. Have my GMAT on Saturday. Last minute advice. Go crazy. Today is what? Thursday. Go crazy. Have fun. I think most of us take the exam a little too seriously, to be honest. You should start uh, being a little fearless without being careless. So you acknowledge that the test is tricky. It can throw a few curveballs, but you're also reasonably fearless. I'll tell you why it sounds very generic, but it's important to not be overly fixated on the result. And I'm telling you from pure verbal perspective, when you are obsessing over other things like how you're doing in the exam, how will the GMAT go, how much time do I have, what gets killed first is your comprehension ability. And your entire exam relies on comprehension. So before the exam, right now you have a couple of days. I'm surprised you wanted to attend this session. I hope you got something useful out of it for what it's worth. But don't do too much. Today is Thursday. Your exam is day after tomorrow, Saturday. Tomorrow is a day when you should absolutely chill out. By chill out, I mean revise your error logs, see some of those patterns again. um, Definitely revise the quant formulae, the stuff that is you tend to forget. For example, every time I take a break from quant, I realize that I forget some of those number property stuff or absolute value formulas and all that. So good to revise that. You could do a couple of small time sets just to stay sharp without tiring yourself. Cognitive fatigue is a real thing, so don't overdo anything. On the next day, one of the typical problems I see with students is bad start because of a lack of warm up. Sometimes your brain takes some time to get used to it. So, uh, warming up maybe a couple of questions before you jump into the exam is a good idea in general. So, I will usually do that with the section with which I'm starting. So, if I'm starting with verbal, maybe at 2 3 questions of verbal CR, easy questions. The objective is not to fry your brain, it's just to get warmed up. That's useful. Otherwise, tomorrow don't bother too much. Relax on the eve of the on the day of the exam. Go have fun. Think of GMAT as a game. Be at peace. Whatever happens, if it takes more attempts, you will take more attempts. No problem. If this attempt works, fantastic. Else there will be other ways. This exam by itself should not determine your life. You are much, much more than this exam. I genuinely believe that. But yeah, I hope that helped. What else, guys? Let me just summarize some of the things we discussed. Most of this is covered. Um, Mostly, what I really want you to pay attention to are the yes no test. Mostly, it applies one side, it should make you believe more, one side, it makes you believe less. 98% of the time, that's what you'll see. It's useful if you can figure out a flaw in the argument as you read it, but this has to be an organic process. And I really mean it when I say, especially if you're going to take the exam anytime soon, don't worry about it. Just read the argument, make sure your argument or plan, whatever it is, make sure you're clear on what the conclusion is, what the support is, or what the plan and goal is. Go to the question stem, figure out exactly what you have to do, spend some time absolutely crystallizing that. Go through the choices. With the choices, be careful. Don't just assume that anything that looks completely irrelevant is irrelevant by design. As the questions get tougher, some of those completely weird looking choices, off looking choices might be relevant, but you're not catching it because you're not going deep enough. And therefore, with choice analysis, remember it's actually a three-step process. Just because you read something doesn't mean you understood it. So you might want to kind of pause and make sure that you understood it. If you understood it, then boom, your analysis is much easier. As far as evaluate is concerned, remember, keep it framed in your mind space what exactly you're trying to evaluate. As the choices get tougher, your ability to really connect your choice to that becomes mission critical. Yeah. Um, so yeah, these are some of the good principles we discussed. Pretty much all of this I've tried to bake into this process. Being clear about these things, connecting it to the this one that requires a bit of rigor. That's it, guys. So let me know if this helped. And I think the next time I sit with you, it would be for paradox, I presume, but we will confirm that soon. But meanwhile, let me know how things are. Any other general points? Yeah. Yeah, man. Seriously, we take all these exams too seriously. I say that, and uh, the good thing about the GMAT is just one of the ways to achieve what you need to achieve. And really, people, I mean, especially as Indians, let's say, if you are from India, we do tend to take this, you know, idea that we need a super high GMAT score way too seriously. Statistically, that may be true, but anecdotally, we see a lot of cases. In the since January, and we are heading to the last 2 months, I have seen some of my students who scored 645, 655 cracked their schools. And that happened. I mean, statistically, imagine that somebody converted a great college 645, 655. Statistically, most people will say that's not possible, and that may be right. Statistically, it's tough. But anecdotally, you can always be the exception. Your profile is also a very, very big factor. It's really that's, I mean, most people really underestimate this and overestimate the GMAT. In reality, it is true that your profile matters, how you present your story matters. All those other things also matter. It's not just going to be a GMAT score. So GMAT is it's one of those hoops that you need to cross, and it's a very, damn good exam. It's very good to build those skills in general. That's about it. Don't worry about it. Cat trauma. I understand that. Cat 2025 was a bit interesting, right? I saw a lot of general commentary criticizing Cat this year. So yeah, understandable. Yeah. Thanks, Vikalp, Naman, RY. All the best for your exam. Yeah. KDB, the one, all of you. Cool. Um, if nothing else, I'm gonna see you next time. I think I have a session coming pretty soon. Anyway, it will be out on the YouTubes. Check back in tomorrow. I mean, sometime by tomorrow, day after. I'm sure we'll get the PDF of the session uploaded. What you'll see there is more questions for you to practice. I've dumped a few official questions just for your practice. Anything there, the YouTube comments is open. Feel free to jump in and ask questions if there's some doubt. Okay, here to try and help you. All right, take care. See you. The next session is on CR. Right now, I'm focused on completing the CR question types. So my task here is to provide a certain level of conceptual clarity with all the different aspects of CR. So that's why so far I've done inference, assumption, strengthen, weaken, boldface. Today was evaluate. Um, Paradox is coming up next, I presume. Flaw will also be done. Flaw is a very interesting question type. It covers a lot of things. That is also coming up soon. And yeah, perhaps I'm also gonna cover some of the offbeat ones where you don't get too many questions in general. Think about method and reasoning, error in reasoning. I'm gonna try and see if I can squeeze all of that into a session and deliver that also. So that from a question type perspective, from a CR syllabus perspective, this should be a good resource for anyone. That's the objective here. So yeah, as of now, I'm looking at CR, RC maybe sometime in the future. I love RC. In fact, it's one of my favorites. Cool, yeah. Let's give. Fine. Thank you, everyone. If there's nothing else, I will see you next time. Take care. Have a nice day. Oh yeah, go through that, and if it helps, reach out to me if there's any doubts. Tata. Bye bye. See you, everyone. Have a good day.